Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Lucas Fox Live webinar series, Investing in Spain, Financial Optimization Strategies for Americans Buying in Spain. My name is Jonathan.Watson. I work for Lumon, an international payment specialist. I'm your host this evening to discuss all things finance and investment in the Spanish real estate market. Spanish economy has really been flying ahead in recent years. It's been a real growth story in Europe, and we'll be able to take you one step closer to this exciting opportunity. My dad has a villa in Spain, and I get out there when I can. I love the weather, the food, the people, the way of life, and I'm sure you must do too, hence trying to join us for this session. So I'm joined with an expert panel. We're going to be handing over to our experts for their introductions shortly. Just a little bit of information for you, our audience. We want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so you should see a question box to allow you to submit live questions. Please do feel free to raise them. We have had quite a few questions submitted beforehand. Thank you very much for those, and we will be working through them as well as any that are submitted live. But everyone attending or everyone who's signed up will get a copy of a recording of this webinar, and you'll also have all of the panelists' contact details. It's very difficult to fit the full ins and outs of moving abroad and investing abroad just into 1 hour. So we do encourage you to reach out directly to the panelists to discuss situations in more detail. It's always beneficial. But yes, we're going to certainly try and give you a real snapshot of all of our respective areas, just so you can understand a bit more and say take you one step closer to that dream. So I'm now going to hand over to my panelists for their personal introductions. Mr. Mo Butt, Sales Director for Lucas Fox, our property specialist.
Good evening, guys, and good evening, Jonathan. Thank you for the intro. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Mohammed Butt. I'm the Barcelona Office Director for Lucas Fox International Properties. We are the largest independent luxury real estate agency across Spain, now operating in across 30 different locations. And yeah, maybe people have seen in the news recently, we've just been acquired by a large Italian real estate agency as well as a strategic partner. So there's some exciting things for us going forward for 2025 as well. And yeah, that's more or less a bit of an overview.
Perfect. Thank you very much there, Mo. We look forward to hearing more from you later. And Mr. Shane Clark, President and Co-founder of EAFA, our Euro-American financial advisor. Over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Jonathan. As you said, my name is Shane Clark. I'm the President of Euro-American Financial Advisors. Hopefully, we give away a little bit of what we do in our name. We have a group. We also have an office in San Francisco, founded by my partner, Tom Zakistel. The company is called International Asset Management, and we provide cross-border investment advice for American expats. We're headquartered in Sevilla, and like we were talking before we got on here, there's a lot of interesting changes happening in Spain right now with regard to expats, so we're excited to dive into some of that tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, both of you. So myself, Jonathan, I work for Lumon, an international payment specialist with real expertise in the international real estate market. We've been trading for 25 years. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've helped literally tens of thousands of clients moving money around the world. So I'm very interested in the currency markets as well as having an interest in a lot of the countries we deal with. And I've also appeared in the media talking about the FX markets. So one of the things we like to do in these webinars is to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So just really to try and get an idea on some timelines of when you might be starting to look at property. You should see a poll on your screen now, just asking some questions about when you might be beginning the search. Of course, buying a property overseas doesn't happen overnight. Typical buying process in Spain, we're talking a few weeks, sometimes a couple of months. It just depends on a few different factors, the area that you're buying in. But as I say, it's not an overnight thing, and it just helps us to understand some of the information we can provide you with today to understand where in that process. So we're seeing a lot of people quite keen at the moment, the first half of this year. That could possibly be down to the favorable exchange rate. The dollar is trading very strongly against the euro. We've seen real increase in interest because of that. So yes, a lot of people looking at the first half of the year. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to launch another poll just in relation to the financial aspect of when you might be considering an offer. Important part with all of this is planning your budget, and with the currency markets moving all the time, day by day, second by second, and property purchase overseas taking a good few weeks, sometimes a few months, depending on the situation, understanding your costs and being able to finalize those costs at an important point is extremely important, because buying a currency is how you determine what the property is actually going to cost you, and it ensures things don't get more expensive than you'd bargained for. So thank you very much, everyone who's answered that question. And yes, let's dive into the real questions, the ones submitted by yourself and the ones we're getting coming in live. Mo, let's turn to you initially. Obviously, you're a property specialist or real estate specialist. So anyone early in this process beginning their search, what are some of the real key things that people need to be thinking about now? And perhaps you could just talk a little bit about the buying process as well, you know, the real sort of basic level on this, what people need to be thinking about and be aware of, please.
Sure. I mean, I think the main thing that we always advise any client, certainly if they're international, is get a real handle for what is their actual budget. Firstly, what they feel comfortable with spending, and therefore, if they are looking at financing the purchase as well, getting them in contact with a good quality mortgage broker to really find out what is their purchasing power. I think the main difference that we find with maybe domestic clients and international clients is that because there's such a big variance with regards to the taxation, that what they're used to, maybe the taxes that are in their home country to what they are in Spain, obviously that can vary quite a bit. So when that comes to determining what their actual end budget is, sometimes a lot of those clients haven't factored in the taxation as well. So what we always advise is two things. Let's actually find out what is the purchasing power, get you in touch with a very, very good quality mortgage broker that can do the financial analysis to find out what the amount of loan to value you guys can borrow. And then also with American clients, because of the taxation, is to get these guys also in contact with what is the most favorable way for them to structure the purchase as well, just to make sure that they've covered off all of the potential angles, the liabilities, to make sure that they're not overexposing themselves. And I'm sure Shane can probably give a bit more information on later as well. So I think that's always the first port of call. And then if they are overseas, we typically arrange a video call with the clients to sort of delve into what exactly is their search requirements, what they're looking for in terms of location, the property itself, and then sort of take it on a step-by-step basis to shortlist what we have on the portfolio, what we can offer, and not necessarily wait for them to come over before they can start physical viewings. We're very pro sort of virtual viewings now as well, whether that's through FaceTime or Zoom. So that way the client has a pretty good overview on what's available on the market, what their money can actually buy them as well. So they're not sort of wasting time. That way that when they are in Spain, we've shortlisted a number of properties that they have a serious sort of overview or intent on viewing, and then sort of taking them through step by step the purchase process as well.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Mo. Just to summarize, what does that purchase process look like in terms of, you know, offer and next stages after that? You know, you found your property,
yeah,
put your offer in, gets accepted. What happens next? Yeah.
So maybe rewinding it back, I think the way the simple process is that when you found the property that you want to make an offer on, the way that it would work is that there's something called a letter of intent document, which outlines the purchase price, the advertised price, the offer price that you want to go ahead and make an offer on. Typically, good quality agencies will ask for a 1% good faith deposit transferred to their account held in their escrow, so it's nice and safe and secure. So that way, once the document has outlined those three things, they can then go ahead and present your offer to the owner and to reach a price agreement. Obviously, there's a period of negotiation, but in principle, once the price agreement is there, the letter of intent will also outline timelines for things like the ARAS contract, which is the deposit contract, and the final stage of the signing of the public deed as well. You might have a few more things in there as well, whether the client is looking at financing it through a mortgage or if it's going to be completed 100% cash. But the idea would be that, which is you found the perfect property, you present a letter of intent, you pay a 1% good faith deposit to the agent, they present your offer on your behalf to the vendor. Once you've got a price agreement, it's a legally binding document, and then you proceed to the next step, which is the ARAS contract. That's typically where you'll get into a little bit more detail with regards to the due diligence on the property or the building per se. That's where you'll then pay a 10% of the purchase price. In Spain, it's typically sent directly to the owner's account, and then the remaining part is paid upon the deed signing, which if you're financing it, the timeline would probably be around 3 months. If you're going directly with your own funds, then you can go to deed relatively quickly, within 2 to 3 weeks after signing of the ARAS contract. So it's the main difference is if you're looking at sort of getting it through finance and a mortgage, obviously there's a few more steps to take into account, things like the bank valuation and issuing all the relevant documents. But if it's all cash, then obviously the process is much quicker.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Yeah, it always strikes me in Spain, I mean, things really can move quite quickly, and there's actually a little bit of synergy there with the US, because of course, the US, you can get a property moving pretty fast, can't you, if everything's sort of set up. It's not like in the UK, where things can drag on for many, many months, and certainly some other European countries that I've experienced. So yeah, it's certainly something I've noted. Shane, anything from yourself? You know, obviously there's some important elements you've be able to share with all of this. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, kind of building on what Mo was saying, we get asked frequently if we have any advice on buying properties. And I think working with professionals is paramount. You know, if you're moving to Spain, if you're not familiar with the market, there's a lot of things you just might not know to ask, you know, the real estate agent, your lawyer. So we always advise people work with a lawyer who's specialized working with Americans, and then work with a real estate agent who's also specialized working with Americans. And then kind of how we fit into the whole scheme is looking at, is this a property you want to live in, or is it a property that you want to use as an investment? If it's an investment, we're going to treat it like any other investment. We're going to look at risk versus return and see how it fits into your overall picture.
Good stuff. Okay, Shane, thank you very much. I'm going to stay with you because we've had, well, we're getting a few questions coming in.
Sure.
First one I'm going to go with, so that we found our property, looking at retirement, and obviously where you're concerned with investments. What would happen to my retirement and brokerage accounts when I tell my broker I'm moving abroad? How is that going to affect Americans?
Yeah, this is usually a big surprise for folks. They think if they move abroad, it might not be an issue. You know, oftentimes as well, if they're working with the same kind of family office or broker in the US, they tell their local broker, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Spain. The broker might say it's no problem. And then they move over here. Once they change their address, that broker then sends it, you know, up the chain through his compliance department, and they say, no, we can't work with you anymore. So because of some different legislations, mostly a piece of legislation called FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, that means that brokerage accounts and banks in the US and in Europe need to communicate with each other and to each other's tax authorities. So a lot of people and a lot of these institutions just don't want to work with Americans anymore. So once you become an expat, usually the worst case scenario is they close your account. The best case scenario is they tell you, you know, we can't work with you anymore. You're an expat. You need to find a solution. You've got 60 days, something like that. So usually what we then do, they reach out to us, they did a Google search, they find, you know, a cross-border kind of financial planner. And we work with 2 different custodians in the US who have no problem with you being an expat. So they're happy for you to use your new address here in Spain. It's compliant. And those are Charles Schwab and Interactive Brokers. So for your retirement accounts, things like 401ks, Roths, pensions, IRAs, those need to remain in the US. So those are going to stay in the US, custodied in the US, and then your taxable accounts could be custodied in Spain at a local bank, but usually those remain in the US as well. it's kind of a long-winded answer to that.
No, that's extremely important that people know this, because you've got to fund your lifestyle there, and it's the kind of thing that people sometimes forget about, and then they make the move or they start doing things, and then sometimes it's difficult to go back, isn't it? And
Absolutely,
change.
yeah.
No, okay, brilliant. So May, let's come back to you. I've had two questions now on this, so I'm going to jump in. We've had a live one submitted by Kirsty McCarter, and we had an earlier one submitted in the pre-questions. The golden visa. So, you know, how is the end, and I believe that's the correct terminology, it is ending. What's the changes in the Spanish golden visa? I think it's in April.
Yeah.
What's the implications there?
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. The end is very, very close. The 3rd of April is the final deadline. What we are seeing is a very, very strong quarter in 2025. Everyone is rushing to complete their transactions this year. Like most things, everyone's left it to the last minute, which is causing a lot of chaos and panic for everyone involved, whether it's us as an agency, the lawyers that we work with that are specialists in getting the golden visa applications in. So we're seeing a lot of pent-up demand, a lot from Americans, obviously UK clients as well, and a lot of Gulf clients that are looking to get the property transaction concluded as quick as possible and get their applications in. So the feedback that we've seen from a lot of clients now that we're coming to almost in the end of February, early March, is yes, they want the visa. Yes, they still want to obviously get the transaction concluded, but very, very few clients in our experience were looking at becoming tax resident in Spain. So yes, they are buying the property. They're going to spend a level of period of time in the country. But I haven't come across many clients who are looking at sort of spending more than 183 days a year in Spain, which will therefore make them tax resident as well. So in short, a lot of the clients who've said, okay, if we have missed the deadline, it's a shame, but it's not going to stop me going ahead and purchasing the property as well. So the visa for a lot of clients was kind of more of an add-on rather than the 99 or 100% decision-making factor in going ahead with the transaction. But certainly we are seeing a big final push now from a variety of clients to get the transaction concluded and get their applications into the authorities for the golden visa as well.
Perfect. Okay, so it's almost like a nice to have in certain situations, but not really anything to be too concerned about. I mean, with it being the end of April, I guess it's too late now for people at this sort of stage now, new to this, to be considering that, or is it still possible?
It's still possible. A lot of it depends actually on if the property that they're purchasing, if that property has a mortgage on it or not. If it hasn't, then the whole process is a lot quicker. If it has, then it can be a little bit more drawn out because the mortgage needs to be cancelled in the property register, which obviously is an administrative task that is not down to the buyer who's buying it or the seller who's selling it. So it's a little bit of red tape there that sometimes can move slower, and it's not something that you're in control of. But there's still a good, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks for people to conclude and get their offers in and get their transactions wrapped up.
Perfect. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, I'm going to tackle one now, a currency question. So we've had one coming in talking about an offer being made, offer accepted on a holiday home in Spain, but someone now starting to worry about currency changes affecting the final price, and what advice we have on the final payment. Well, there's lots of different factors to consider there, but absolutely, once your offer is accepted, you should be concerned about when that final payment is due and how much it's for, because the currency market is ultimately what's going to determine what you will be paying. So congratulations on that offer being made, and it hopefully being accepted. We have seen the rates very attractive for US dollar to euro for a number of currencies against the euro. I mean, we've hit very close to 30-month highs for the dollar against the euro in 2025. It's moved just a little bit off that. The dollar's softened a little bit, but actually as of today, you're still about 8 cents better than you were back in September, October last year. So that's a good 7%. So basically buying a property in Spain with US dollars has become about 7% less since the end of September, early October. Remarkable movement. So how can you deal with this from a currency perspective? So what Lumon do, the main reason for dealing with us is our exchange rates. We can help with competitive rates against the banks. I'm very happy to do a comparison if anyone would like to test that. But one of the tricky things is that certainly in the early stages with all of this is getting the Spanish bank account set up. That is, it's not too difficult. You get your NIE number and you can get the Spanish account set up through your lawyer. That does all happen quite early on. But actually, there is another solution with Lumon where we have a euro wallet that you can access to make your payments. So you can make payments direct to your lawyer. You can make payments for any other transactions you might need if you were buying a car, buying furniture. And feedback we get is it's a lot easier to make payments from this Lumon euro wallet that you get access to rather than the Spanish bank. I'm not going to say anything bad about the Spanish bank, but they're a bit like banks all over the world. Sometimes with these larger amounts of money, you've actually got to go into the bank to actually set up some of these transactions. So we have an option where you have an online account with us. You can manage it all yourself online, but we also have a personal contact over the phone to talk you through the currency markets. So what this allows you to do is, okay, you've got this large amount of money you're going to have to transfer at some point in the future. So the key question is, well, when do I buy my currency? What we're trying to avoid is you purchasing a currency at a bad time, or you finding that the market's moved against you when you come to make your final purchase after you've put the offer in and it's been accepted. As I say, there's been about a 7% movement in people's favour. It'd be a shame to miss out on that. So what we can do is help to lock in an exchange rate at a much earlier point in the process so that you understand your costs. Now, there's no really right or wrong answer. Everyone's different. Some people will be on a very, very tight budget. They don't want to take any risk whatsoever, so we can lock in a rate nice and early so that there's minimal risk. Others will take a more speculative view, and we can share all sorts of market research on the forecasts ahead to try and help them make a decision. So yeah, congratulations on your offer being out there. I'd certainly recommend a chat with a currency specialist. Myself and in my team are very happy to do that, just to talk through the market, talk through some of your options, and make sure you don't get any nasty surprises. Questions coming in thick and fast. Shane, let's turn to you. A question about trusts. Good one here, hopefully for you. Just asking about if I split my funds between the US and Spain with money in a trust, how will that affect things from a tax perspective? This might be one you need to pick up offline, but anything you can share with us on trusts and moving to Spain?
Sure. I would say in general, you'd want to speak to a lawyer. So I'm not a lawyer, I can't speak to that. But generally speaking, trusts from the US are not recognized in Spain as a general rule. Now, there's other structures that you could use, but you definitely want to speak to a qualified tax attorney who understands the joint tax treaty between the US and Spain.
Okay, perfect. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, Robert, who raised the question, you'll get all our panelist details and we can certainly introduce you to someone who will be able to help. Thank you for that question. May, let's come back to you. Look, we know Spain's really been, the Spanish economy has been really flying ahead this year. And I think the last couple of years outperforming a lot of other countries in the Eurozone, as we said. What do you think is driving all this? What's making Spain such an attractive destination for real estate?
I actually read a report from CBRE recently. I think it was their investor intention survey for 2024 that ranked Spain as one of the top European destinations for investment. I think they actually placed Madrid in second place as a European city and Barcelona in fourth. So I think actually there's a lot of overall noise being made about Spain, specifically certain cities within Spain as well. And that comes from low interest rates, so it's attractive for borrowing costs are very, very low right now in comparison to other European cities, I think. Economic stability, economic growth. I think in terms of the euro overall, For a lot of the countries where the domestic client is coming from, sometimes there's a little bit more instability. So I think people are looking at the euro for a little bit more stability sometimes as well. And then a lot of it depends on whether the client is looking at relocating or whether it's a pure investment, as Shane mentioned earlier as well. I think in terms of lifestyle and overall cost of living, it's still comparatively cheaper than a lot of other European cities and destinations. So I think if you tie in all those different factors together, Spain's still one of the main drivers, I would say, that is attracting a lot of not only tourists, but people that are looking at relocating to here. We're now seeing a lot of people apply for the digital nomad visa because they're choosing Spain as their home and relocating now with the free movement of labor or the flexibility, let's say, that's being given by a lot more employers. People are looking at Spain as to say, okay, well, rather than sitting in the US somewhere or the UK or even further afield, if they're able to carry out their same function from for their employer, and the employer's okay with that, then they're looking at relocating to Spain because their money just goes a lot further as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really good to see that in Spain. And of course, the improving economy must be affecting property prices. They've been going up. Is that right?
For sure. We've definitely seen a lot of growth in the last 12 to 18 months. And more so, obviously, since the start of 2025. But I think that's also a bit of a spike coupled with the elections in the US, which is always creates a lot of movement and a ripple in the market. When you couple in the fact of the deadline for the golden visa, probably what we are seeing is a lot of pent-up demand in a very short period of time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going into Q2 and Q3 this year, whether we still see that same level of activity and trend, or whether it does start to maybe level out a little bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting because from a currency perspective, the European Central Bank, they're forecast to cut interest rates more aggressively than the US. They're also forecast to cut more aggressively than the UK. So in terms of the leading central banks out there, they're supposed to be, say, lowering their interest rates the most. Now, that's interesting for two reasons. Number one, from a currency perspective, that generally weakens the currency. And that's why the euro's definitely been weaker in recent years because of these lower interest rates there. So a lot of the forecasters for the year ahead are seeing the euro weaker. There's a range of forecasts, and I'll perhaps come on to that a bit later. But the second point now, and why it could be good news ahead, is because generally the lower interest rates will encourage the economic growth. And it's good for borrowing as well. So sounds like things could be quite rosy for the rest of the year. We talked offline, didn't we? I mean, look, no one knows exactly what's around the corner, but we had all these elections last year, didn't we? Of course, we had the American election, the UK had an election, France had an election. So coming into this year, a lot of these things are now settled, aren't they? So certainly it seems to be giving the sort of markets in general a bit more political stability, with people knowing, okay, look, this has happened, you know, things are moving forward, and there's less unknowns ahead, perhaps. After a very difficult few years, you know, COVID, certainly from the UK side, Brexit and all these things going on in the world, where we really didn't know sometimes what was happening month to month. You know, it might be, dare I say it, that there is, you know, a bit more sort of stability and confidence coming back into the world.
I think this year as well, what we're seeing in Spain is there's a lot more regulation around rental prices and what a landlord can actually charge the tenant. And I think that's actually fueling a lot more people moving from being a tenant to actually being a homeowner. Obviously, that's tied in with the slightly lower interest rate and the low cost of borrowing. So I think for the first time, people are really looking at jumping from being a tenant to actually taking the final leap and buying a property for themselves.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. Well, let's jump back into some of these questions. By the way, Ruth Vega has just asked, will a recording be available? Yes, absolutely, Ruth. Everyone who's signed up to today's webinar will get a copy of the recording at the end, and you'll be able to reach out to our panelists direct for a chat. Thank you for allowing me to share that with the audience once again. Shane, let's come back to you. Someone's asking about cash flow projections. Perhaps that's useful with mortgages and just clients trying to understand their future costings over in Spain. Can you help with that sort of financial planning ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of our core services. So our two main services are investment advice and financial planning. So the financial planning aspect, there's a number side of it, and then there's a non-number side. The number side, we prepare kind of 3 personalized financial statements for you. So an income statement, how much money is coming in versus your expenses, a balance sheet, look at your total assets, and the third one is a statement of cash flow. And then we incorporate any goals you have. So maybe you want to buy a beach house, you want to speak to Mo, maybe you want to, fund your grandkids' higher education, whatever your goals might be, we incorporate those into the plan. And then we project them all into the future. And we have different milestones. So maybe you're just at retirement, you're moving to Spain, it's going to be a new adventure. You might not know what your expenses are going to be, you might not know what your taxes are going to be. So that's a perfect time to do a financial plan. We can use that new information, put it in the plan. We get an idea, this is how much money you have. This is how much money is going to be yielding to you each year. We can then use a currency broker to get it to your Spanish bank account. And I think it's important to have that information to help make decisions. So you can see how much money you're going to have every month. If you've got Social Security, maybe from multiple countries, we can incorporate that. The software is pretty robust, so we can include different tax rates, and we get a real clear idea of if you can achieve those goals or not. So there's a probability tied to success. So we think with a 92% probability, you can achieve those goals, or 2%. So depending on how the probabilities work out, it gives us information on what we might need to do. Maybe we need to reduce some of these goals. Maybe we need to be more aggressive with the investment accounts. But we can definitely help look at cash flow over time as well.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for that, Shane, and good one to pick up offline. Anyone watching to really talk through those strategies, because every situation is going to be very unique, I would imagine. May, let's turn back to you. We just had a question about costs. Obviously people see sometimes the price of a property online. What sort of numbers should people be factoring in overall, in terms of perhaps purchase costs, but maybe any other taxes and things just to be aware of? I mean, it varies in Spain sometimes, doesn't it?
That's the slight complication. A lot of it comes down to where you're purchasing. So if we look at Madrid, for example, the property transfer tax is 6%. If we look at Catalonia, then we're looking at 10%. So I think the first thing we need to determine is where the buyer wants to live and where they want to buy. But as a general rule of thumb, if they're looking in Catalonia, if we use the example of Barcelona, we'd say 10% for property transfer tax or VAT if they're buying a new development. If it's a new development, another 1.5% stamp duty. And I would estimate 1% more for your legal, notary costs and anything else. So anywhere between 11 to 13% would be a good ballpark figure, just to make sure that you're not having any nasty surprises when doing your sort of projections in cash flow.
Excellent. Okay, very sensible to do that. And of course, you can reach out to Mo and the team there to get a bit more information on particular areas and what to expect. So we sort of touched on financing a little bit earlier on, and perhaps this is more of a question to both of you, but for Americans coming over trying to get their financing together, what are some of the sort of first steps? When I say financing, I mean perhaps talk about a mortgage. Okay, you've got a mortgage broker you work with, but what's some of the advice you'd be giving to people there at an early stage?
I think it's definitely that, which is let's get you in touch with a good quality mortgage broker that can review all of your incomes, your expenses, and really get a good idea and feel for what is your borrowing power. Because then we can really obviously go shopping and say, okay, a lot of clients actually think they can afford a property that's much cheaper than actually what is their real budget. So by borrowing a little bit more or more than what they expected or more than what they initially thought or had outlined in terms of to spend on the property, we can open them up to a wider pool of potential properties that they want to look at. And obviously with the cost of borrowing at the moment being so cheap, a lot of clients get surprised and they say in the end they turn out borrowing a little bit more money but getting a lot more house or apartment for their cash. So I think that's always the key first piece of advice, which is, right, let's actually find out what level of money you have as a deposit. This is the approx taxation that you're looking at spending depending on the region where you're buying. And then let's get some feedback from multiple different lenders and make sure that we're speaking with the lender that is right for you as well. Because again, the way that it works in Spain is that you get essentially one offer of a specific interest rate, but then if you purchase different products like life insurance, home insurance, alarms, these kind of things, then that can obviously drill the interest rate down. But it's not one offer or one bank that works for every single client. So I think it's got to be a tailor-made service for each individual client. And obviously we can then advise from there what sort of properties they should be viewing and therefore then placing offers on as well. But specifically for American clients is kind of what we touched on earlier as well. One very, very important part of that process is also how to structure the purchase, whether they want to set up a local company, whether it be an offshore company. That's probably more Shane's area of expertise to discuss. But it always makes more sense to look at these sort of things before the purchase rather than after, because I think it's after the fact is a lot more complicated to backtrack and get your ducks in line rather than before the purchase as well, which has happened with a few clients where they took an advice from the start and then afterwards it's caused them a lot of headache, a lot of money, and a lot of stress. So that's always the first piece of advice, which is that where are you tax resident? Let's get you in touch with an appropriate tax attorney, and let's get you in touch with a good quality mortgage broker that can review your finances for you as well.
Very sensible. Okay, thank you, Matt. And Shane, anything to add there? Of course, you have.
If I could, sure, if I can jump on as well.
Yeah.
I would say we always take it in small chunks. You know, it's a lot to process moving overseas for the first time, or if you're already here, it's still important to take it in chunks. So we look at, if you're 6 months out, let's start by getting on the right visa. So I think Mo talked earlier about the digital nomad visa. If you get on the right visa, you might be able to get on a better tax regime, one that they call locally the Beckham tax. So it's a flat tax of 24% versus the tiered structure, and they're only taxing you on your assets in Spain. It's really important if you can get on that. The other one is if you've got property in the US. So if you sell that property before you become a tax resident in Spain, you know, there's lots of tax breaks in the US where you typically don't have to pay a lot in capital gains on that. Now, if you become a tax resident in Spain, then you sell that property, you're going to be paying taxes on it in Spain. So the whole plan there is really important to look at every element of it. So property in the US, when to sell it, which visa to get on, and then moving the money. You know, our rule of thumb is if you go to a bank and you want to transfer funds, it's probably going to be 3%. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yeah, research we've undertaken shows we can generally beat the banks by 1 to 2 cents. Depends on the bank and the types of contracts, but yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I've seen some horror stories over the years.
Yeah, so I think, you know, getting in touch with the right people, looking at it in small chunks, getting your investment accounts moved over to an expat-friendly broker, looking at the property, speaking to an immigration attorney, a tax attorney, on both sides. So if you're going to be moving over here, you need to speak to somebody who's going to keep filing your US taxes, and you need to speak to somebody who's going to be filing your Spanish taxes. So just quickly, how it usually works is you file and pay, once you become a tax resident, taxes in Spain in June. You file an extension on your US return until October 15th, and then you file in October using either a foreign earned income exclusion or a foreign tax credit. And that's just to offset any taxes you would typically pay in the US, as a very general overview of how it typically works for our clients. So I think that's take it in small pieces and speak to professionals.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Always speak to experts on this and do your homework before. So I've had a question here about currency, and thanks for you know, your comments there about savings versus banks. To say with Lumon a good 1 to 2 cents. Very happy to do a comparison. To say Lumon, we have a license for trading clients from the United States, and we can cover every single state in America. There are some currency brokerages out there that, number one, cannot deal with clients in the United States. There's different licensing rules for brokers operating outside of the US to actually be able to trade and deal with US registered clients with a US address, but Lumon has that license. So yes, very happy to talk through our service with anyone. And we have a question here. It's about managing the window of selling a home in the US to then buying the new one in Spain. So yeah, it's a great question because this touches on some of the problems that we often see where, you know, people all happy, excited, put their offer in, it gets accepted, but of course they're not actually paying those euros technically to the lawyer for, say, a few weeks, couple of months, and the rates will be changing in that period. So what do? You're selling your home in the US, so that's not going to complete for a month, and then you're going to be buying in Spain in 6 weeks, but you've put the offer in now. You don't want to get caught out. So Lumon offer an option here. It's called a forward contract, and what this allows you to do is actually to fix today's rate for a payment in the future. So we're normally talking a deposit around 5%. So if it's $1 million you're selling to purchase your euros, you know, your property in the States is $1 million. We'd ask for $50,000, but you're going to be able to lock in the rate on that full $1 million worth of currency to buy the euros. So that once you get to 4 weeks, that month period, when the US sale goes through, you'd send the rest of the money, the $950,000. That, of course, adds up to the $1 million, and you get that fixed euro amount. So it's just understanding your cost in advance, and we can work these contracts in series. So you may not just do, as I said earlier, some people are quite risk averse, they're on a tight budget, they don't want any risk, so you might do that whole amount early on just so you know where you are. Other clients might want to consider doing part of the money. You know, they're prepared to take a little more risk. Shane was mentioning about some of these attitudes to risk, and it's the same with an FX contract. You may do half of the money instead and wait to see what happens with the rest. So the volatility is only going to be on $500,000. And of course, you can change those numbers according to what suits you, and at different rates of exchange, of course, over that period. So a number of different ways we can structure that purchase where you don't quite have all the funds available. And just to give you some information on forecasts, so if we look at the range over the longer term forecasts on dollar to euro, there's a 12-cent variation. So if you're talking about $1 million into euros, that could be a 120,000 euro difference. I mean, that really could make or break a sale and purchase for a lot of people, and it's certainly not something you want to be caught on the wrong side of. Bank of America, they're actually not being as positive as you might expect potentially for an American bank on the dollar. They're seeing it going up to about 110. The rate at the moment is about 104. You know, €1 buying about $104. So yes, not quite as positive as some out there. HSBC, the global bank, they're seeing 98 cents as their longer term forecast. So that's in favor, of course, of the dollar, seeing the dollar going back to buying more than €1 through parity. So what I've learned from many years of doing this is that none of these banks know exactly what's going to happen next. No one knows exactly what's around the corner. There is a bit of a misconception sometimes that there's some magic key to the currency market, that someone out there knows exactly what's going to happen. That's false. The currency market is just a reaction to what is happening in the world globally, economic news, political news, different events that come out. So just because no one knows what's going to happen, that doesn't mean that you should just ignore it. And some people do choose to do that, but there are some options here to lock in rates so you know exactly what things are going to cost you and you don't get a nasty surprise. And if you have got money invested that you're waiting to mature to see those gains, well, again, you may want to look at fixing the exchange rate at least, so that if you are making some lovely money in the stock market or in your other investments, that when those do mature, the euro purchase is fixed. So as I say, you're getting the benefit of those gains. So yes, a number of ways we can structure that. Mo, let's come back to you. You mentioned obviously you deal with property all over Spain. What are some of the really popular areas we're seeing at the moment? Where's hot?
I would say definitely the three main cities of Barcelona, Madrid, and Valencia are the three main. Well, definitely for us, the office is doing the most business, and we're seeing the most number of inquiries coming in, both domestic and international. That tends to be for people that are more looking at relocating and living here on a more permanent basis. If it's more for retirement or maybe even semi-retirement, then Ibiza and Mallorca are two islands that are extremely popular at the moment. A lot of it depends on what people are buying as well. I think in the islands, what we've seen is more large-scale villas in kind of gated communities, so people looking for a little bit more privacy and space. And in the cities, obviously, it's more apartment-based, but either beautifully renovated apartments or new development buildings as well. It seems to be very, very popular at the moment in the city markets.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's always difficult to know exactly where to buy when you look at these things online, isn't it? There's so much property out there for sale, and it can all be a bit of a minefield. So I guess best to pick up the phone to you and try and find out where's hot and where's not. So you mentioned people can do the viewings online. How does that work? Is that a sort of live sort of camera tour, or how does that work in practice?
More or less, actually. So I think since it all came about since COVID, when obviously there were so many restrictions in regards to movement of people moving around. We never really thought, and it was a surprise to us as well, that people would transact and buy something without actually physically coming and viewing it. We always did a lot of sales for investment purposes to investors that were purely buying it for an investment. Didn't really matter where it was or how big it was or the characteristics. So they were purely looking at placing funds and getting a rental yield off the back of their investment. But what we have seen as well, certainly in the last 3 years or so, is people willing to sort of pull the trigger on things if they're further afield and not able to physically be here. And through FaceTime or WhatsApp video, doing viewings with agents, both on the specific apartment, but also on the surrounding areas as well. So don't be surprised if you see one of my agents walking the streets on a video call to a client, one waving their phone around, because most likely they're on the video call to an international client, showing them the surrounding areas or the building or any amenities in the local area.
Fantastic. Yeah, out there sharing the beautiful properties you have. Excellent. Well, that could be any of our viewers today. We could get you looking at some property very quickly and very easy. Right, we've had a question coming. We had a few questions on this. We'll sort of save it to the end, getting some of the juicy stuff. This tax for sort of overseas buyers, reading lots in the press. It seems to have got a little bit quieter on that, but it's certainly a hot topic still. Mo, I'll start with you. Obviously, the Spanish government extra tax on property. What are your thoughts there?
I think it's, in my opinion, it's a lot of propaganda at the moment and a lot of noise. So obviously, as you mentioned, there was this news outbreak or whatever in regards to a proposed 100% increase for non-EU, non-resident buyers. I think it's caused a lot of confusion whether it's 100% increase in the value of the property or whether it's 100% increase in the current tax rate. So most likely, from my understanding, from lawyers that we've spoken with, notaries that we've spoken with as well, everyone's leaning more towards the proposed increase in the current tax rate. Although nothing's been approved, nothing's really been further discussed apart from the news that came out, I think it was about a month ago now already. So I think the purpose was more to cause noise in the market, because there is this, in conjunction with this anti-tourism kind of movement as well that's currently happening in various different parts of Spain as well. So I think from the central government here is more about, okay, we're listening to the Spanish people and kind of doing something about it, although no real further news has come out. And I think it's quite a long process to get anything sort of approved and obviously passed in terms of a bill. So at the moment, it's nothing more than pure speculation and noise in the market. So I don't think it's anything to be worried about. But and rightly so, what a lot of clients are doing is asking about it because it is such a hot topic. And what our advice has been is that before any form of increase in the current tax rate does take place, whatever that may look like, whether it's a sliding scale or a set percentage increase on what is currently there, if you have your heart already set on moving to Spain, let's sort of expedite that whole purchase process. Let's get you doing virtual viewings. Once we get an offer or a price agreement, let's get you over. We can put offers in subject to a viewing within a certain period of time as well. So much more easier for European-based clients to jump on a plane and come over for a day and view 3 or 4 properties back to back. And obviously get the transaction concluded as quick as possible. So I do think it's going to be a while before any form of proposed tax is going to get passed. But either which way, if in the unlikely event something does happen, you don't really want to be kicking yourself saying, I wish I'd pulled the trigger on it 3-4 months before, because I had my heart set on moving. I knew what I wanted to buy. I had the money as well. Everything was there. But for whatever reason, I didn't go ahead with the decision. So that's kind of our advice to any non-EU, non-resident client at the moment, to just for their own peace of mind, really.
Anything to add there, Shane? I'm sure you've had a few conversations about this. Thank you, Mo.
Yeah, we have had quite a few conversations. I think a lot of people are feeling a bit of panic if they're reading the news, with relation to tourists in Spain and some political pushback on foreign investors, things like that. I would say the reality living here is I haven't felt that at all. I think sometimes you read a newspaper and you think, oh my God, that sounds terrible. But the reality here in this situation, I haven't felt that. I think there's some political, jousting going on with trying to, make some deals that improve, let's say, the government's role right now. But in terms of making large, meaningful changes, we haven't seen a lot of those materialize. So taking a step back on taxes in general, coming from the US to here, one of the big ones people always ask us about is the wealth tax. So we don't have a wealth tax in the US. There is a wealth tax in the regions in Spain. And if one of the regions like Madrid or Andalusia doesn't have one, there's solidarity tax, which is more of a national wealth tax. So that is something I think that is real and does need to be planned for and addressed. And I would say similarly to the US's tax code, Spain's tax code is quite complicated, unlike maybe Portugal, for example. So if you're looking at moving from the US to Spain, there are a lot of things you can do structurally and in terms of your investment portfolio to optimize the tax situation, which again, I think speaking to a local tax attorney and a US CPA who understands the joint tax treaty is paramount.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you both. Yes, I mean, everything I'd sort of heard and read, like you both mentioned, it seemed very political, this. Doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, but yes, it was a lot of political sort of noise, and it might be quite difficult to fully implement in some of the regions anyway. It wasn't straightforward, but yeah, best thing anyone concerned with that, speak to Mo, speak to Shane or myself. We have the contacts there as well to try and find out up-to-date information. I think that's it. Don't always believe everything you read in the papers or online. It's very easy for these things to be misconstrued, and speak to the experts. That's definitely going to be a takeaway from today. Okay, just to both of you, I'll go to you, Mo. What are some of the common sort of pitfalls? What's one or two of the most common pitfalls? Once people have gone through the buying process, they go, I wish I'd known that. Something that you think is a little point to work on there.
I think certainly for US clients, because of the dual tax treaty, it's not getting the right structure in place before the purchase. It's kind of what Shane mentioned earlier on in terms of if they're selling a property in the US, getting that concluded before you become tax resident in Spain is always a good move. So I think we've had a few cases where the client took wrong advice from the start, fell in love with the property in Spain. Fantastic service, obviously, from our side. Went ahead, bought the property, loved it, but then later on got a massive tax bill from the IRS. So wasn't that best pleased when he had to then go through his attorneys to try and restructure everything, and that was a bit of a headache, stressful, and a costly process. So it kind of goes back to what we mentioned throughout the course of the interview, which is just get prepared. I think if you prepare well and get everything well organized, everything post-sale tends to just go a lot more smoother. And that can be from getting your own taxation and residency sorted, the visa, as Shane mentioned earlier as well. But also if you're purchasing, for example, a new development, just make sure that you're working with the best agency, reputable developers, make sure that the post sale is also very well executed, and just do your research. Actually, I think that's the key takeaway from my side, to make sure you're working with professional people, good quality attorneys, good quality bankers, good quality tax advisors as well, that will make the whole process hassle-free and as smooth as possible. We all know buying a home and moving, regardless whether it's in your home country and certainly overseas in a country that you're not that familiar with, the rules, the regulation, the language can be stressful. So just make sure you're with the best quality partners that can make the whole thing happen for you with the least amount of stress and headache.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mo. And anything to add there, Shane, please?
Yeah, I would echo that absolutely. What Mo said, planning ahead is paramount. So looking at all of the different components, real estate, visa, taxes, investment accounts, physically moving your stuff, all of those types of things, planning at least, I would say, 8 to 10 months before you move is really going to make you feel a lot less stress than if you try to do it 3 months before you move. And if you offload that stress on the professionals, so people who are specialists in working with US expats, who are licensed to work with US expats, and who understand, and that's really their main kind of client base, is really important. I would say getting on the right visa as well, specifically. And then in terms of investment portfolios, a huge one for us is people who buy mutual funds in the EU. That creates a huge problem for their US taxes. So they always come to us with, hey, these are called passive foreign investment corporations, PFICs. I bought all these PFICs. My CPA told me I got to get out of them. What do I do? So that, not buying those in the first place solves the problem. So again, planning ahead, speaking to the right people, avoiding the problem. We want to be, I always say, financial planners, not financial firefighters. So plan ahead, avoid these messes, and just enjoy, the move.
Yeah.
Fantastic. No, well, thank you very much, both of you. It's been a really insightful evening. We've covered some really good ground. We're really getting to the end of the webinar now, I'm afraid, but I hope everyone watching has enjoyed it and found it useful. We will be sharing a copy of the recording. You can reach out to the panelists direct. Just before we sign off then, I just want to finish, both of you. You're obviously living in Spain. You've been living the life there. Just share with us, some of the joys of living in Spain. Share with our American clientele. What are they going to be looking forward to? I'll go with you first, Mo.
I think in my case, well, as you can probably hear from my British accent, I'm born and raised in London. So the part of the move was first to escape the dreary weather, which was the number one driver. But then I think I've been here now for 13 years. So I think the main difference and the attraction and the appeal and what kept me here is the weather, the lifestyle, the cost of living, the overall work-life balance as well. I think I still have a lot of friends based in the UK, and the hours that they're working is insane. I think in Spain in general has a pretty nice work-life balance and culture, quite a nice family culture as well, in terms of good quality schooling. In terms of safety, it's super, super safe as well as a country in general. So I think Spain has a lot to offer, regardless of the region that you're looking at relocating to, as a country, as a culture, and what it can bring you as an individual and as a family. Relocating here, it's a big draw and there's a lot to offer the individual.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mo. And to you, Shane?
Yeah, I would agree with all of those points. I would say for me in particular, the focus on family is really maybe different than the US and the UK, and much more family-centric approach. And just to share a little anecdote, we had some clients a couple of years back that were really analytical. So they looked at which country to retire to. And they made a spreadsheet. I think they reviewed about 20 different countries, and they reviewed all of the different criteria: cost of living, best education, best hospitals, best healthcare, transportation, everything. And the two countries that they narrowed it down to was Thailand and Spain. And I think, that's quite telling if you look at just anecdotally, what Mo said, the food, the weather, all those types of things, but then objectively looking at the data in terms of the best healthcare, the best infrastructure, lowest cost of living, most safe, best hospitals, I think Spain's pretty appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And just Shane, like you say, you're from the US yourself. Just a quick bit there, on your journey, perhaps, not a long, but yeah, just some anecdotes, perhaps, as an American living in Spain.
Yeah, so I left the US in 2008. I was in the UK, loved the weather for about 8 years. And so I've lived in the UK, then Belgium, and then France, and here as well. And I think Spain is by far my favorite country I've lived in, in terms of all the things we discussed, but there's just a lot less pressure living here. I think that's the biggest thing, especially coming from the US. Having conversations with a lot of my friends or associates in the US, there's a lot of just structural elements in your life that cause a lot of stress that just don't exist here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can't even really believe that or realize it until after you come here. And then everyone says, oh yeah, I'm not going back. I love it here. It's great. And it's true. It's absolutely the case.
Fantastic. I'm sold. I don't like being bullied about the weather here, but I can't disagree. We had, I think, our first real day of sunshine today, and it was probably only for about half an hour that the sun was in the sky. So, as I say, my dad's got a villa over in Spain. I think I'm going to have to get over there quite quickly. But look, ladies and gentlemen, we have really reached the end of the webinar. So I'm just going to hand over to each of our panelists for a very quick outro to say goodbye. So Shane, over to you, please.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you for everybody for watching tonight, and thank you for hosting, Jonathan, as well. If you're looking for cross-border investment advice and financial planning, that's what we specialize in, particularly for U.S. clients. We're headquartered in Sevilla, licensed independently with the Spanish investment authorities. We can operate in 11 different countries in Western Europe. And with the U.S. office, we've been doing this for 22 years. So this is really our bread and butter, as they say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shane. And Mo, over to you, please.
Yeah, I second what Shane mentioned as well. So thank you everybody for joining tonight as well. It's been a real pleasure. Jonathan and Lumon as well for hosting the webinar tonight. And yeah, if anyone who's looking for property in Spain, regardless of the region, even if we don't have an office, we can certainly put you in touch with a collaborator or a third party that is well trusted and has obviously been pre-filtered as well. But we're now 30 offices across the country, so I'm pretty sure, depending on where you're looking at buying, we can certainly help you guys out and facilitate your needs.
Thank you so much. And just from me, yes, thank you very much to our expert panel. Thank you to the audience for joining. For me, the currency aspect, as we said, the dollar is trading very strongly against the euro, and that may well continue. There's certainly plenty for us to discuss for the year ahead. So yes, anyone wants to reach out to any of us directly to discuss everything in more detail, please do. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Good luck with your search, and hopefully speak to you in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.